All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Spark Talks. Today I'm joined by Arthur Van Gerven, who's the CEO of the EMEA region for SPARQ360. And Arthur, we're going to be talking about ESG challenges and how we turn those into opportunities. And
hmm
uh, and we know that companies are under a lot of ESG pressure. Some of this comes and goes with geopolitical shifts, maybe, but it's here to stay. And regulations and emissions targets and customer demands, those are all constants and kind of an increasingly present in the lives of our company leaders. And at some level, I think you would agree that this is seen as a risk, like a compliance risk. There's fines, there's reputational loss, there's issues when you're not compliant with these things. But we're seeing more and more companies, and we're working with more and more companies in turning this risk into opportunity. And so, you work closely with a lot of our clients, and how are they experiencing this pressure, and what does that look like for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I have to say before we go in there that indeed, like you said, due to the geopolitical challenges and changes, there's a little bit confusion on the compliance regulation for the moment.
Mhm.
But we know, like you said, it's going to come back. It's going to stay. There will be reporting obligation on CSRD and other platforms coming up over the coming years. It's not completely clear what the uh, exactly thresholds will be and the size of companies who need to report. But what we clearly see is that also still customer demand is driving reporting on ESG. And that's not really changing. So large companies are still asking for that. And that means for the logistics companies that they need to comply, that they need to show what they are doing, and also that they need to make sure that they have the organization and the tools in place to do this reporting. So it's
Mhm.
complexity indeed, and it's if you don't comply, there's risk, not just on fines, but also the fact that a client may walk and or doesn't include you in a tender for a new project. But it
Yep.
also gives opportunities because you're forced to look into your supply chain. You're forced to look into all your processes, and it's not just giving opportunities for reduction, for instance, for carbon, but it also gives you opportunities for other things like cost reductions.
Yeah, and that's something we see a lot when we work with clients. As you're having to gather the data, you realize how much data you don't have, or how much data is incomplete, or there's a lot of hidden opportunity there once you have that increased visibility. And I think from a management, or maybe a CFO perspective, compliance is a cost. It's a pure cost. But as you're pointing out, when you look at that, when you start to dig deeper, it can be a catalyst. It can be a catalyst for savings, for opportunities. How do you see compliance becoming that catalyst?
It forces you to really dig into your way of working, into the way you set up your supply chain. And like I said, we typically see a combination of reduction of, for instance, carbon, if you look to the environmental part of ESG, but it also has impact on your social part of ESG in the way you have organized your workforce, in the way you have organized your communication internally. So it forces you to really look into your processes and see where you can optimize. And especially if we focus in that environmental part, which is, I would say, the most treacherous one within ESG and the one that requires the most work and data gathering, um, we see companies who are starting to look into this and they really have benefits while they reducing carbon footprint and improving cost levels at the same time. Because you are forced to look into data, you are forced to look into network optimization with the end, like I said, cost reductions and carbon reductions. So for sure, it's a catalyst that helps to improve the effectiveness of your organization. I fully agree.
And do you have some examples or an example of a company that's kind of tackled this? What does a
There are
typical
multiple, I would
engagement like
say.
this look like?
Yeah, I think if you look to the majority of companies, they all look into this for a certain part. But we've worked with multiple customers as well in the industrial industry, with a complex network into Europe, where, for instance, they did a network study to optimize their footprint and also to optimize their modes of transportation. Um, and it was really the driver of also carbon reductions that made them to make choices. And at the end, that also was the best for their cost reduction, um, because they really made mode shifts,
Mhm.
which was still valuable and still acceptable within their service levels. But it was a huge impact on cost and carbon reductions. Um, we know that a lot of companies are looking into electrification of trucking, electrification of their fleet. That has challenges for sure. Um, it's a time, it's let's say, it's a development that improves year by year. And in some cases, it's too early to do it. In other cases, it's really the right time. It's completely depending on your network and on your focus and mode of transportation. But we clearly see benefits, but also companies with their own fleet that have the benefit of reduction of carbon and cost at the same time.
So let me back up a second here because we're talking about companies that are doing doing a network study and learning a lot about themselves. And some of these companies are coming under, CSRD and scope 3 requirements, and some are coming in under like VSME or EcoVadis or something like that. Can you explain the difference between those and how this journey sometimes starts to where they can get to that point where they have that increased visibility?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. Um, Typically, we see now, well, one step back. A year ago, when CSRD was very clear and a lot of companies need to comply with that, there was a strong drive out of compliance of CSRD. Uh, we see now, because it's on hold for the moment and they are reinventing the reporting structure and format and also which companies need to comply to CSRD. But what we see now is that still the demand of customers is in this area of ESG. It now slides a bit to the more, I would say, the non-governmental reporting tools like EcoVadis as an example, which is still in place. And of course, it's voluntarily, but it's a database of thousands of companies worldwide where they report out on their ESG activities. And customers can pull that information out of that database and see what the performance on ESG is of those potential suppliers. That's still being used big time. The same you could say for CDP. It's more a little bit focused on manufacturing companies, but we see that those platforms are increasing, more or less waiting for the moment that there will be clear new guidelines on CSRD in Europe. VSME, what you clearly mentioned, is a kind of CSRD light, how I call it, for smaller companies, and it's still not officially introduced, or at least not officially an obligation. But it will be also a framework that will be used by smaller
Mhm.
suppliers to provide information to their clients who want to have reporting on ESG. So you will see that this reporting compliance will shift and adjust constantly, but it will be there, and it will be really an obligation of companies to keep on reporting on that and satisfy customer demand.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, once you have the data, for whatever reason you're getting the data, once you have the data, the next step really is that operational piece. It's cutting waste, cutting costs, it's doing the network studies, figuring out what you need to take care of and where there's opportunity, lean, efficiency. In some cases, it also means resiliency, right?
Yeah.
So how, and they always say green is green. If you're reducing your carbon footprint and making things, more efficient, you're also, cutting costs and waste. So how does the route optimization and things like that, how do these things play in, and tell us a little bit about the 3 C's?
Yeah, so indeed the 3 C's, how we call it, it's really optimizing carbon, cost, and circularity. And it's in a perfect world, all three at the same time. It would be the best situation. But like you said, you're starting with the data. It's there's a lot of data available, and especially now with AI, even more data is accessible. That helps to really make a clear analysis of your supply chain, and where you can focus on the certain buckets. And it can be the nodes in your supply chain. It could be your warehouse operations or your manufacturing operations, but it can also be the transportation flows between those nodes. We see that once you have that data, and a network study or even an RFQ process is an excellent way to start this journey, is that you can look at all these several options to optimize the 3 C's. Some examples on transportation is food optimization, consolidation of shipments, aggregation of shipments, where you don't ship every day, but you combine filling rates in trucks that could lead to different packaging design, where you can really assure a better fill rate, software tools to optimize your load planning, all these kind of tactical tools and processes could help to reduce carbon and mileage and to reduce cost. The interesting thing is now actually that in the Netherlands, as an example, there will be a new trucking fee, as you can call it, introduced, where trucking companies need to pay a certain amount per driven kilometer on Dutch highways, or at least on Dutch roads. It will be introduced mid next year. At the same time, the Dutch government is now introducing a program to really help companies to optimize their network and to reduce the kilometers on the Dutch road infrastructure. They're forcing them to either go into different equipment like electric trucks, or to work in all kind of other optimization platforms or optimization studies to reduce those kilometers. And that's introduced end of this year. And if you're smart, you use that and get help from outside specialists to reduce your mileage.
Excellent. And so now, that kind of covers that next level, right? So the first level we talked about was dealing with the compliance risk and having to deal with that bare minimum. And you've taken us through kind of that second pillar, or that second level, which is realizing savings and turning that compliance need into a strategic benefit. But there's another level too, that trust, the innovation, the growth. There's beyond savings, beyond waste reduction, there are other factors. And can you tell us give us some insight into what some of these others are?
Yeah, well, if you look to what is really the driver for sustainability, or the driver for ESG, it's we always call it the list of six, the six drivers of sustainability. It starts, of course, with the basis is environmental action. We all do this specifically for the E of ESG, for environmental action and improvements. Secondly, also on the social part and the security and compliance on the governmental part of ESG. But environmental action is a very important one. Next to that is compliance and regulation, as we just discussed already. Reporting obligations like CSRD, the light version VSME, they are really driving reporting and also behavior of companies, and it's important. Another very important one, that's one of the main drivers now for companies, is customer demand. They want to know what is supply doing in the area of sustainability, and how do they differentiate themselves, and how serious do they take it. And we still see that this is a very important driver, and it's not really changing despite the evaluation of the formal compliance reporting regulation. Last but not least, but another important one is recruiting of young talent. If you look to the new generation of people, the younger generation, they're very, very interested, very keen on sustainability efforts of employers. They want to know what a company is doing on this area before they even sign up for a contract. It's very important topic for them. Branding of a company, of course. You want to make sure that your company name is aligned with your efforts of sustainability and the other way around. That's important as well at this point in time. And last but not least, your financial capability and your valuation of your company. We see some fluctuation in that area up and down, but for sure, it's still an important topic to which will be taken into consideration for credits and also on the valuation is your performance on ESG. So even on that level, it's an important topic to be serious with sustainability.
Now, I'm going to pause here because SPARQ360 is just wrapping up for the second year in a row a survey of supply chain managers. And we release a report every year, and we ask about these 6 drivers of sustainability and how important people view those. And we, they rank them from not important at all to extremely important. And I know last year that all 6 of them, even in the United States, tested at the top 2 as either extremely or very important.
Yeah.
And that was a little surprising to me, but people can go online and grab a copy of that report. We're just wrapping up the second year, and we'll be beginning the third year in 2026. Are there other things you think are important for people to be aware of? I mean, the journey is clear. Like, you start with basic compliance, then you find some cost savings, and you turn it into a competitive advantage, and then you really strive for these extra opportunities that ESG can present. If you had one piece of advice for a logistics leader that's kind of starting their journey into tackling these ESG challenges, what would that be?
Yeah, I would say start where the pain is the most, or start where the demand is the largest. And this point in time, for companies who are really in the beginning of this journey, it often starts with customer demand. But that could be changing again next year into compliance in line with the regulation. But customer demand for this moment is one of the first drivers. Start where the demand is the biggest. Pick it up from there, see what is needed to do so. Go for an EcoVadis certification, and that forces you to really go through this journey. And just start with that. Create awareness in your organization, gather data, and from there you can indeed focus on cost savings and also the combination of carbon reductions or other improvements in ESG, and turn that into a competitive advantage. That also helps you to brand your company, and it helps you as well to improve the attractiveness of new talent. So start where the demand is the biggest and work your way up from there.
Excellent. And if people want to get a hold of you and have any questions, how can they best reach you?
They can reach me on my email, arthur.van@spark360.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, and they can also call me on my mobile number if they want to reach out to me. And I'm more than happy to talk further on this and to give you more advice, recommendation, what we see with companies that is happening in the market now, and how you could really do your benefits or take your benefits from there in your own organization.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Arthur, for taking the time today, and thanks everybody for listening. Until next time, I'm Evan Juncker, and this is SPARQ Talks.
Thank you.